I walk past him every Tuesday on my way to the elementary school where I teach. Every single Tuesday for 3 years, I walk past this old man sitting on the same bench in Veterans Park, and I never once stopped to say hello. I never even really looked at him, not the way you look at someone. You know, that glance that takes 1 second and tells your brain nothing is worth your time. That was me. That was what I gave him every week. There was a golden retriever with him sometimes, a dog older than most friendships, with a gray muzzle and eyes that had seen too much kindness to forget how to give it back. She would lie across his lap, and he would feed her pieces of sandwich from his own hands, and I would think the thought I think about all homeless people without ever saying it out loud. How sad that no one takes care of that. I never thought, maybe he's taking care of something else. I never thought, maybe he's the one doing the caring. 3 years, 56 Tuesdays, and then one morning in March, the bench was empty. The bench was empty, and Daisy, because that was the dog's name, I learned later was lying curled up beside it, her nose on the cold wood, waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. I walked past her. I walked to school. I taught 34th graders how to write persuasive essays about things that mattered to them, and I told them that every story has a narrator, and the narrator's perspective shapes everything the reader believes. I never thought I was the unreliable narrator in someone else's story. I never thought that the most important truth I would ever learn was hiding in the part of the story I wasn't paying attention to. My father was a Marine. That's how everyone in our family said it, not my dad asterisk or the man who lived with us, but a Marine asterisk, like it was a job title that canceled out being a parent, being a husband, being someone's son. He's a Marine, full stop. When I was 7 years old, my father came home from Vietnam. I remember this because my mother made a cake and cried while she baked it, and I asked her why happy things made her sad. And she kneeled down and told me that sometimes people come back from places that have changed them in ways you can't see on the outside. And those changes are so big that even the people who love them most have to learn how to live with a stranger wearing a familiar face. I was 7. I didn't understand that she was telling me goodbye to my father before he even walked through the door. He was there, but he wasn't there. He would sit in the living room at night with all the lights off, staring at nothing. My mother would try to hold his hand, and he would flinch, not from disgust, but like she was a sound from too far away, and his body was startled by the distance he'd traveled to hear it. He had nightmares that woke the whole house, screaming nightmares. The kind of sounds that make a child understand that the world contains more terror than anything she can imagine in the dark. I learned to be quiet. By the time I was 9, I had learned not to ask him questions. By 12, I had learned not to expect him at dinner. By 15, I had learned that love doesn't mean someone stays, even when they're sleeping in the bed next to you. My mother left him when I was 17. She cried and told me it wasn't his fault, that he was sick, that PTSD was a real thing even though nobody had the name for it back then. They just called him distant, detached, broken. She said she couldn't save him. She said sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is admit that you don't have the tools. I hated her for leaving. I also hated him for what he brought home that made leaving necessary. After the divorce, I didn't see him much. My mother had primary custody, and he had every other weekend. But after a while, the every other weekend became once a month, became holidays, only became a phone call on my birthday that he often forgot to make. By the time I was 25 and finishing my education degree, I had arranged my life so thoroughly around his absence that his presence felt like a mistake, like he was showing up to an event he was never invited to. I became a teacher. I chose elementary school because I wanted to be the adult who was there, who showed up, who built something solid in the lives of children who desperately needed to know that consistency existed. I wanted to prove that my father's kind of love, the kind that evaporates without explanation, wasn't the only kind. I was very good at my job. I was also very good at not thinking about why I needed to be good at it. I moved back to my hometown when I got the job at Riverside Elementary. Small town, decent pay, the kind of place where everyone's grandmother knew everyone else's cousin, and the autumn smells like apples and old money, and a kind of quiet that passes for peace. Veterans Park is 6 blocks from the school, walking distance. Good for mental health, for thinking about lessons, for pretending that my life was exactly what I wanted it to be. I never learned the homeless man's name. I saw him on the bench every Tuesday and Thursday, sometimes more if the weather was warm. He had a weathered face and white stubble and an old military jacket that had faded to the color of rust. His hands were gentle when he fed the dog. That was the detail that made me glance away the fastest, because if his hands were gentle, then he was a person, and if he was a person, then I was choosing not to look, which is a different kind of cruelty than simple ignorance. The town had a shelter. That was what everyone said when anyone mentioned homelessness. There's a shelter. Like that solved the problem. Like it meant his presence wasn't something we had to reconcile with our own comfort. I would guess later that I passed him on that bench 150 times in 3 years. Maybe more. I never counted. I never wanted to know the actual number because numbers make things real, and reality is inconvenient. He would sometimes leave the park carrying bags of dog treats. Where did he get them? I don't know. I never asked. Officer Moore told me later that Will, homeless men named Will, would go to the dollar store and spend money he didn't have on things he didn't need, which is to say, things other people needed more than he needed to eat. Officer Moore was the one who told me his name. Will, that's all, just Will. He's all right, Officer Moore said once when I commented on how sad it all was. We were at the grocery store, and I was making conversation, the way you do when someone makes eye contact. Keeps to himself, never bothers anybody. The dogs are lucky to have him. Lucky, that was the word Officer Moore used. Like abundance is measured by who gets to take care of you instead of the other way around. I remember thinking, if that's lucky, then what am I? I never pursued that thought. It seemed dangerous. Noah Brooks showed up in my 4th grade class 2 years ago. He was small for his age, quiet, the kind of child who sits in the back and observes more than he participates, and I recognized him immediately as someone who had learned that being invisible was safer than being known. I tried everything to draw him out. Small group work, partner presentations. I even emailed his mother asking if there were anything at home that might help me understand his learning style. His mother wrote back one sentence, "Noah's fine. He's just shy." And I knew from that single sentence that Noah was not fine, that he was not fine at all, and that his mother didn't have the tools or the time to help him become fine. So I gave him what my father never gave me. I paid attention. I showed up. I noticed the details. I noticed that Noah wore the same 3 shirts in rotation. I noticed that his lunch box never contained more than a peanut butter sandwich and an apple. I noticed that he would sometimes give half his sandwich to Carlos, who was hungrier and less embarrassed about it. I noticed that he would stay after class sometimes and reorganize my bookshelf or sharpen pencils, just to have a reason to stay in a quiet room where an adult was nearby. I wrote his name on the donated book list. I made sure the free snack bin in my classroom was always full. I called his mother 3 times a year with updates phrased in ways that highlighted his strengths instead of his struggle. And I never once connected the dots between what Noah needed and what a man on a bench in Veterans Park was trying to provide for creatures who couldn't argue about it. One Tuesday afternoon in late October, Noah asked if he could walk home a different way. We were alone in the classroom after dismissal, and he asked it like he was asking permission to change his entire life. "Of course," I said, "but show me on the map first. I want to make sure it's safe." He pointed. The route passed directly through Veterans Park. "That's fine," I said, and I should have asked why. I should have asked where he was going, who he was meeting, what he was looking for in that particular direction. I should have cared enough to notice. But I was tired, and noticing is exhausting. He would take that same route 3 times a week after that. I knew because he started mentioning things in his writing assignments. References to golden retrievers, descriptions of an old man's hands, a story about feeding stray animals that he'd written in such careful, meticulous detail that I knew he was writing about something real, something that mattered to him, something that made him feel less alone. I gave him an A. I wrote a comment about beautiful imagery. I never asked him to elaborate. Winter came early that year. By November, the news was already talking about record temperatures, homeless shelters filling up faster than they could expand, donations running low, families struggling. The shelter director came to Riverside to do a presentation about community service. She talked about the numbers, how many people, how little funding, how much need. She talked about it in that particular way that professionals talk about crisis. The facts bleached of emotion, the statistics divorced from the actual human reality of trying to stay warm in a park bench. I participated in the canned food drive. I sent home a letter asking parents to contribute. I did everything that a person who cares does without actually being present for the caring. In late November, I noticed Noah had moved seats. He was sitting in the front row now, and his posture had changed. He seemed lighter somehow, less burdened. His shirt, one of the same three, was cleaner. His lunch box had more in it. He was drawing again, creating illustrations of the golden retriever in the margins of his assignments, capturing her face with such tenderness that I could see he'd studied her carefully, noticed the specific way her eyes crinkled at the corners. It made me happy that Noah seemed happier. I never connected it to anything. I never asked. By December, there were rumors around town that Will, the homeless man, had given his winter coat to another person who didn't have one. Officer Moore confirmed it. Officer Moore seemed to know everything about Will because Officer Moore had also learned to pay attention. "He's not supposed to be able to give anything away," Officer Moore said, more to himself than to me. "He barely has anything, but somehow he keeps managing to help people anyway." I thought, that's foolish. That's self-destructive. That's the kind of choice someone makes who doesn't understand that survival requires selfishness. I never thought, that's grace. I never thought, that's what it looks like when you love people more than you love your own comfort. In the school office before winter break, I processed the scholarship applications. That's one of the invisible jobs of teaching. You learn which children's families are struggling, which parents are working 3 jobs, which kids are hungry enough that free lunch is the only meal they're guaranteed. Noah's application was there. His mother had written that she was doing her best, but the best sometimes wasn't enough, and she was grateful for any help the school could provide. I approved it immediately. We had a small fund for students like Noah. Funds that schools have because there are always students like Noah. The fund was depleted by January anyway. It always is. That same week, I got a call from the school office. Noah's lunch debt had been paid, all of it, anonymous donation, cash, enough to cover not just Noah but 3 other children whose families had fallen behind. "That's wonderful," I told the office manager. "That's so kind." But I never asked who. I never wanted to know. Gratitude is easier when you don't have to picture the face of the person who decided their own hunger mattered less than yours. January was brutally cold. The kind of cold that makes people check on each other, ask if you're okay, offer blankets and hot chocolate like those things can substitute for safety. The kind of cold that kills people who don't have doors to close. I taught my lessons. I graded papers. I made sure Noah's lunch debt stayed paid. I did the architecture of care without ever stepping foot in the actual house of it. Officer Moore came by the school one afternoon. He asked if I had a minute, and something in his face told me this wasn't a casual visit. We talked in the hallway outside my classroom, and he told me that Will was getting sick. That he'd seen him coughing, struggling to walk, that he'd tried to convince Will to go to the shelter for the worst weeks of winter, but Will had refused. "He says it's too loud there," Officer Moore said. "Says he can't sleep, says the other people need the beds more than he does." I listened to this information and felt it land somewhere in my chest that I didn't want to acknowledge. "That's very sad," I said, the way I always said these things. The way that acknowledged the sadness without taking any responsibility for it. Officer Moore looked at me for a long moment. I could see something working in his face, a decision being made and then set aside. "Yeah," he said finally, "it is." He left without asking me to do anything, which might have been kinder than if he had. That Friday, Noah turned in a story for creative writing. It was about a boy who finds an old man who's lonely, and the boy brings him soup that he makes himself, 1 can of broth and 1 can of vegetables mixed together in a pot. The old man cries when he eats it, not because it's good, but because someone remembered that he was hungry. I gave him an A, I wrote. Noah, this is beautiful and shows real emotional depth. Have you thought about becoming a writer? I didn't ask, is this real? Are you taking care of someone I should be taking care of? I didn't ask, are you 10 years old and doing the job that I, as an adult, should have already done? By February, the whole town seemed to know that Will was sick. Not that they did anything with that knowledge. Knowing and acting are 2 entirely different countries, and most of us chose to stay in the first one. Dr. Patricia from the health clinic told me that Will had pneumonia and that he'd refused to come inside, refused antibiotics, refused anything that would take him away from the park where the dogs came looking for him. She said this like it was a fact, not a tragedy. Like refusing medical care is just a thing some people do, not a sign that they don't believe they deserve to live. Daisy got skinnier too. I noticed that now because I was looking at what I'd been trained not to see. Her ribs were showing, and Will would give her pieces of his own meals even though he was coughing into his sleeve and shaking with cold. The news talked about homeless shelters at capacity. The news talked about record low temperatures and the number of people found frozen in their cars. The news made it sound like a statistic, a problem, a tragedy that happened to people, not people who were happening right now in Veterans Park, 6 blocks from my school, 6 blocks from my home. I went to the grocery store and bought dog food. Good dog food, the kind with the vitamins and the real meat. I thought about leaving it at the park. I even got as far as carrying it to my car. And then I thought, if I do that, then I'm acknowledging this. I'm acknowledging that I see him, that I know he's there, that I could help, and I'm choosing this small gesture instead of actual help. I put the dog food back. I told myself it was because I didn't know if he'd want it, if it was the right kind, if my gesture would be received as help, or as charity, or as an insult. I told myself a lot of things that made sense if you didn't look too closely at the foundation they were built on. Noah asked me one day if I believed that people could change. We were alone in the classroom after dismissal, which was becoming more frequent. I was noticing. Noah was coming to school earlier and staying later, using my room as a place to exist. I do, I said, because I'm a teacher and I have to believe that. Why do you ask? Because I think some people are good their whole lives, Noah said. And some people have to learn it, and some people just do it anyway, even when nobody sees them doing it, even when doing it costs them everything. He was looking at his hands when he said this. That's very perceptive, I said, and I meant it. What made you think about this? Somebody told me that the richest people aren't the ones with money, Noah said. The richest people are the ones who have the most love to give. And I think maybe they're only rich because they choose to give it, even when they don't have anything else. I felt something crack open in my chest, some calcified part of me that had learned, alongside my father, that love was something you could run out of, something that could be exhausted by too much demand. That's wise, I told Noah. That's really wise. And I still didn't connect the dots. Or maybe I did, and I just wasn't brave enough to follow them. March came, the snow melted, the days got longer. I didn't see Will on Tuesday. On Thursday, his bench was empty, but Daisy was still there, lying curled up against the wood like she was trying to hold his warmth inside herself. I walked past her the way I had walked past him, looking but not seeing, acknowledging but not acting. I got to school and taught fractions to 4th graders, and by lunchtime, Officer Moore came to find me. There was something in his face that I had been expecting, in some part of me that had been bracing for this since November. Will passed away, Officer Moore said. Last night, they found him on the bench this morning. Daisy was still with him. I don't remember saying anything. I remember the fluorescent lights of the school hallway suddenly being too bright, too loud, too present. I remember Officer Moore's face, which had a particular kind of sadness that comes from watching someone slowly disappear and not having the power to stop it. "He went peacefully," Officer Moore said, and I didn't know if this was true or if he was just being kind. "He was with the dog. That seemed to matter to him." I nodded. I think I thanked him. I taught my afternoon classes in a state of profound dissociation, where my voice was teaching grammar and punctuation, and my mind was somewhere else entirely, somewhere I didn't want it to be. At dismissal, Noah didn't come to get his backpack. He wasn't in class. I learned later that he had gone to Veterans Park to say goodbye to Daisy, that he sat with her for hours, that he was the one who finally called the police because someone had to, because a dog can't survive the winter alone. Will was buried in the Veterans Cemetery on a Tuesday. I almost went. I stood in my bedroom with my funeral clothes laid out and I almost went, and then I thought about how I had no right to mourn someone I'd refused to see, and so I stayed home instead. The shelter director took Daisy, said she'd find her a good home, said the dog had already been through enough. Said it like dogs understand the calculus of suffering the way humans do, like Daisy would be grateful for rescue as long as it came before the cold got too deep. And then there was the letter. Jack Reynolds, the journalist from the local paper, got the story. I don't know exactly how. I learned later that a shelter volunteer had found it in Will's backpack, that it had been written in careful handwriting on lined notebook paper, that Jack had recognized something in those words that demanded to be shared. The headline read, "Decorated Marine dies homeless in Veterans Park, but his last letter changes everything." I didn't want to read it. I sat at my kitchen table with the newspaper folded in my hands, and I could feel the moment waiting for me, the moment where I would look at Will's name and see my father's name, and have to reconcile the person I'd been avoiding with the person I'd been mourning in a home I'd refused to leave. But I knew. I think some part of me had always known. My hands were shaking when I unfolded the paper. To anyone who finds this, please don't be sad for me. I had a life that mattered. I had people who needed me, even if they didn't know it. I had dogs who loved me without asking me to be anything other than what I was. I had a kid named Noah who showed me that kindness isn't learned, it's chosen. Every single day, it's chosen. I was a Marine. That's where my discipline came from, the ability to survive on almost nothing, to show up every morning, to do the next right thing even when everything in me wanted to stop. I came home from war carrying things I couldn't name and couldn't put down. My wife loved me anyway. My daughter tried to love me anyway. But I was a ghost in their house, and they deserved to live with someone real. So I left, not because I stopped loving them, but because I loved them enough to let them live without me. I made mistakes. I drank for a while. I lost my job. I lost my home. I lost the ability to believe that I deserved to keep living. And then I found the dogs. The dogs didn't ask me to be okay. They just asked me to be there. So I was. I went to the park every morning and I fed the dogs, and I fed the people who came to help the dogs, and I tried very hard to live in a way that was useful instead of just a way that was possible. I'm writing this because I can feel winter getting close. I can feel my body getting tired in a way that sleep won't fix. And I want to say something before I go, in case anyone's listening. The richest life isn't the one where you have the most stuff. It's the life where you give the most away. It's the life where you see someone hungry and you split your sandwich. It's the life where you notice that a kid is lonely and you sit beside him on a bench, and you don't ask him to explain himself, you just make space for him to exist. I'm proud of the person I became when I had almost nothing. I spent the last years of my life the way I wish I'd spent all of it, present for the people around me, noticing them, remembering that kindness is a choice you make every single day. I want that to matter. I want my death to mean something, even if it's small. So here's what I'm asking whoever reads this. Don't build anything fancy for me. Don't spend money on ceremonies. Instead, please be kind to the people your eyes usually skip over. Notice the homeless veteran in your park. Notice the hungry kid in your classroom. Notice the dog that nobody's taking care of. Notice them. That's all. Just notice. Feed someone who can't feed themselves. Sit with someone nobody else will sit with. Give money you don't have to people who need it more. Live the way I learned to live only after I lost everything, like every moment with another person matters, because it does. The people I loved when I was living the life I thought I should live, they couldn't save me, and I couldn't save myself. But a homeless Marine and a 10-year-old kid and a golden retriever. We saved each other. We made a life that was small and quiet and actually mattered. I don't want to be forgotten. But more than that, I want the people I love to forgive themselves for the ways they couldn't save me, especially my daughter if she's reading this. Emma, if you're reading this, I left because I didn't know how to be in your life in a way that wasn't hurting you, not because you weren't enough. You were always enough. I just wasn't able to be what you needed. I watched you grow up. I watched you become a teacher. I watched you learn to see the invisible people even when it's hard. I'm proud of you. I was always proud of you. Please be kind to yourself, the way you're learning to be kind to others. And if you see a kid who's hungry, or a dog that needs help, or a person sitting alone on a bench, please stop. Please see them. Please help them. Do it for me. With love, *. Will Carter. I read it 4 times before I could see it. Before the words stopped being letters and started being sound, which started being meaning, which started being the fact that my father had been watching me watch him, and I had never looked back. I read the part where he said he watched me become a teacher. I read the part where he said he was proud of me. I read the part where he asked my forgiveness for being broken in ways I couldn't fix. And I finally understood that forgiveness isn't something you give to someone after they're dead. It's something you have to give them while they're still watching, still living on a bench in a park, still hoping that someday you might stop long enough to see him. I had already stopped looking. I called Noah's mother that day. I told her Noah was a remarkable child and that I wanted to check in on him, to make sure he was processing everything that had happened. She sounded confused. Processing what? She said. About Will, I said. The homeless man, your son knew him. Oh, she said. Yes, Noah mentioned that. He seems sad about it, but he's a resilient kid. Resilient. That's what we call it when a child learns to survive without asking for help. Noah came to school the next day, and I asked him to stay after dismissal. I told him I'd read the letter. I told him that I knew Will had been my father. Noah's face changed. He looked at me with a particular kind of sadness that children carry when they realize an adult has finally caught up to something they understood a long time ago. I didn't want to tell you, Noah said carefully, because I thought you didn't want to know. How did you know? I asked. He showed me a picture, Noah said. One day when I was at the park, he had this old photograph of you when you were little, maybe 7 or 8. He said, "That's my daughter. She's a teacher now. She's teaching kids to be good people." And then he put the picture away, and I understood that seeing it made him sad in a way that he wanted to manage alone. I sat down on the edge of my desk because my legs didn't want to hold me anymore. He loved you, Noah said. He talked about you all the time, not like he was angry about how things turned out, but like he was proud of you even though you didn't know he was watching. Why didn't he tell me? I asked. Why didn't he just come find me? Because he thought you'd be happier if he stayed gone, Noah said simply. He thought he was doing the kind thing. That wasn't his choice to make, I said, and I felt tears starting in a way I couldn't control. That wasn't his choice to make for me. No, Noah agreed. But he made it anyway, because that's what happens sometimes. People make choices about protecting you that you never ask them to make, and then you have to live with the consequences of their protection. He was 11 years old. The town held a service. Not a funeral. Will was buried before anyone knew who he was, but a memorial. The mayor spoke about honoring our veterans. The shelter director spoke about the crisis of homelessness. Officer Moore spoke about Will's gentleness, his consistency, his way of showing up for creatures who couldn't show up for themselves. And then they asked if anyone else wanted to speak. I stood up. I didn't plan to. I didn't have notes or prepared remarks. I just stood in that church and looked at the faces of people who had walked past my father 300 times and said the town had a shelter. so everything was fine. "My name is Emma Carter," I said. "Will was my father." The room went quiet in a way that I could feel physically. "I grew up watching him struggle with things that war had done to him," I said. "And I decided that his way of loving people wasn't good enough, that his inconsistency was a failure, that I was justified in removing him from my life. I told myself it was for the best, that he couldn't help us, so it was better if he wasn't there." I stopped, I swallowed, I continued. "But he was there," I said. "The whole time he was there. He was in the park, making sure hungry dogs had food. He was watching his daughter grow up and become someone who notices invisible people. He was saving his money so that a lonely boy could have a hot lunch." My voice broke. He was loving us in the ways he could, which were smaller than the ways we wanted to be loved, and so we decided they didn't count. But they did count. They count now. They'll count for the rest of my life. I looked at Noah, who was sitting in the front row. My father taught me something without ever teaching me, by living in a way that proved it every day. He taught me that kindness is a discipline, that love is a practice, that showing up for people who can't ask you to show up for them is the most important work you'll ever do. I sat down. After the service, people came to hug me. They said they were sorry for my loss. They said my father sounded like a good man. They said they wished they'd known, they would have helped, they were grateful to know about him now. I heard these things and nodded and thanked them, and I thought, you did know. You saw him. You just decided not to look too closely. But I didn't say that, because I was one of them. The town created a memorial garden at Veterans Park. They put in benches dedicated to local heroes, and one of them has my father's name. People have started leaving flowers there, dog toys, bowls of dog food. Children bring their parents to the bench and tell them the story. I've seen them do it. I've listened to their versions of it, how they tell it to make it make sense, how they reduce a 72-year-old Marine's entire complicated life into a simplified story about kindness. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the simplified version is what people need in order to start changing. I volunteer at the shelter now. Every Saturday, I help with intake, with processing, with the logistics of keeping people alive. I've seen homelessness up close, the mental illness, the addiction, the systems that fail people, the choices that aren't really choices because the only options are bad and worse. It's hard work. It doesn't solve anything. It just makes one person's day slightly less difficult, which is another way of saying it doesn't matter until you're the person whose day got slightly less difficult. Noah is in middle school now. He volunteers with me sometimes. He wants to be a veterinarian. He wants to work with animals who belong to people without homes, because he learned that you can show love to animals when you haven't been shown love by people. Daisy lived for 3 more years. She was adopted by an elderly woman who had also lost someone important, and they spent their remaining time together being quiet, being sad, being alive. I went to my mother's last year. I told her about the letter. I told her what my father had written, what he'd said about leaving being an act of love, what he'd said about his failure to be present for us. She cried, and then she said something I wasn't expecting. "He should have let us make that choice," she said. "He should have trusted us to be able to love him even when it was hard. That's what marriage is. That's what family is. It's choosing to love someone even when the loving is painful." I thought about that. "He didn't have the tools," I said. "No," she agreed. "He didn't, and that's sad. That's genuinely sad, and it's not his fault entirely, but it's still sad that he didn't have the tools. It's sad that the person he loved the most had to figure out how to love him while he was busy protecting us from himself." I see that bench every time I walk through Veterans Park. I see it in winter when it's covered in snow and in summer when it's warm. I see people sitting on it, sometimes alone, sometimes together. I see people in pain, people in transition, people who have temporarily lost their place in the world and are trying to figure out how to be human without a home to hold them. I think about my father sitting on a different bench, feeding dogs, and I think about how he was doing theology without meaning to. He was proving something about the nature of love and suffering, and the ways that grace shows up when you're no longer looking for it. I was his daughter for 38 years before I understood what he was trying to teach me. He was trying to teach me that the people the world tells you to look past are often the people carrying the most important lessons. He was trying to teach me that kindness isn't a luxury item reserved for people with resources. It's a survival skill. It's the thing that keeps you human when everything else has been stripped away. He was trying to teach me that showing up for people, for dogs, for children who are lonely, is the most revolutionary act available to us. I'm trying to listen now. I'm trying to be the narrator who looks directly at the invisible people instead of looking away. I'm trying to choose, every single day, to be the kind of person my father became when he had almost nothing. And when I walk past the bench with his name on it, I think about how the richest people aren't the ones with money. They're the ones who give it all away. They're the ones who notice. They're the ones who choose kindness, even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. My father taught me that. It just took me far too long to learn.